Seconds to
Hey everybody, this is Purge, and I'm going to be bringing you guys a starting item build overview here. So I'm going to be winging this, but a couple quick things to point out. First of all, I am cheating my ass off, so I'm going to be giving myself a lot of gold. But most importantly, the thing to remember is you start off every single game with 600 gold. Now, this is usually the fastest and easiest way to tell whether or not somebody's bad at the game. Obviously, there's things like laning and things that make a big impact, but I'm just going to talk about a couple item builds here that will hopefully shed more light on you why you purchase the things you buy. So, once again, you have 600 gold. Let's talk about first off, let's talk about some common noob item builds. Something like a Boots Tango. So let's see what this gives us. We're getting 55 movement speed out of the Boots' speed, and we get one Tango, which is going to heal 115 HP 3 times, which equals 245. So 245 HP healed right here, plus the Boots gives us the movement speed, increases our speed by 1/6, I believe, which is a moderate amount. It does work well for chasing. Now, the reason that this is generally a bad starting item build is because we only get 245 HP regen. That's it. Something that you guys may notice when I play games, I very, very rarely go back to heal. Usually the only times I ever do this is, let's say it's an early and mid-game scenario where my hero doesn't have a lot of HP regen, or I'm completely out of mana and I have a giant mana pool and not a lot of mana regen. Those are generally the only reasons I ever go back to base. This is why Courier is really important to have, because then you can continue laning and bring items to yourself. So when you are laning, the most important thing to remember is you want to stay in that lane as long as possible. That is why something like Boots First with the Tango is bad. One Tango is almost always not going to be good enough to keep you in your lane for a very long period of time. It does depend on game to game. I mean, I'm sure you guys have all had games where you sit in lane and you don't use any regen at all, but that depends a lot on your lane matchup, first of all. Some heroes can get by without regen items. Maybe like an Invoker is probably a semi-decent example of somebody who doesn't really need a lot of regen, but can still benefit from at least one salve or one Tango. That's really important. But as a general rule, guys, one Tango is not at all enough regen. A very, very typical starting item build, or at least enough regen, is at least one salve and one Tango. There's some very extreme situations which, on your guys' level, you don't have to be concerned yourself with. For example, sometimes we occasionally see a Boots and a Tango soloing the top hard lane. That way they can run back to their tower easier. That's literally the only case where we see pro players picking up Boots first. Almost always we're not going to see that, but generally as a new player or anyone who's not at the professional level, do not get Boots Tango first. So looking at the regen here, one salve, one Tango, that is healing 400 HP here, and this is healing 345 HP. As you can see, the salve does heal more, so that's one reason why it's nice to diversify your regen rather than getting something like, oh, I want 2 Tangos, because Tangos are cheap, but they're only 90. A salve is 100. So you would say, oh, I want 2 Tangos. But think about this scenario. Let's say you're in a lane, you lose 80% of your HP. I'm down to here. I'm pretty darn weak. You can say, oh, cool, well, I'm going to slowly heal back up. But the problem is that you can eat a Tango, you're going to get that HP regen, but it's going to take at least 2 to 3 Tangos before you hit full HP again. And the problem with that is you won't be able to lane effectively if your HP is low. It's going to be easier for your enemy to just nuke you down once again. It doesn't like put you back up into the safe range. So that's why you don't want to get 2 Tangos. That's why it's important to eat or to get a salve and a Tango instead of just one Tango. So there we go. I'm going to eat those to waste them. I'm going to purchase another healing salve. This is literally, for almost all heroes, this is going to be enough regen. Once in a while, like I said, we have a Boots Tango solo on the top lane. This is literally the only exception to this. Maybe a Juggernaut who wants the first blood, but people use that argument all the time. And it's oftentimes easier to get other items and then pick up your Boots on Juggernaut. So there we go. Basic regen. Sometimes you might want to get more regen than that. Pick up a second Tango or pick up a second salve, something like this. Once in a while we'll see stuff like this in high level games, but generally, guys, one salve is going to be enough and one Tango is going to be enough. Don't be afraid, or make sure that you get at least this much regen. It's important to keep you in lane as long as possible, and once again, the reason you want to stay in lane as long as possible is because you get lots of experience by standing in lane, you get access to last hits, and you possibly can kill your allies. So experience and gold, that is what you're there for, and that's why you don't want to run back and forth to the jungle, or to the fountain, because if you run out of regen, you have to be like, oh, time to run back to the fountain. You run all the way back to the fountain, you run all the way back to lane. You should probably TP one of these links if it does come down to this. But You know, that's a lot of time spent away from creeps, and you're going to get behind in levels and behind on farms. So if you look at support heroes or players who aren't very good, they generally don't really know what to do, and they end up spending not enough time in lane because they don't have the appropriate items, or they get harassed out, and then they get under-leveled as the game goes on. So regen, very, very important. It's just the start of item builds is regen. Pretty much everybody needs regen. There's a couple very, very extreme case heroes. Juggling heroes can get away with that regen, Enchantress, stuff like that. But the average hero gets some regen. Alright, so now what comes down to is the rest of the 400 gold that we now have. Since most heroes do want to salve Tango, it kind of comes down to how you fill in your item build from here on out. Some heroes, like Invoker, doesn't need a lot of regen. He can go very stat-heavy items. So when I play Invoker, I do something like this. And look what I just did. I just filled my inventory up with a crap load of stats. So if you remember what each individual stat does, I'm going to go over this quick because it's important. Every strength point gives you 19 HP, and very, very small HP regen. Every 7 armor or agility points gives you 1 armor, and every agility point gives you 1% attack speed. And then finally, for every intelligence hero, you get 13 mana and 0.04 mana regen. Now, depending on what your primary attribute is, you also get an extra damage, for whichever stat you get. In this case, I'm an intelligence hero as Zeus, and as you can see, it says each point increases damage by 1. So as an intelligence hero, I get extra damage by picking up int items. That's important in a lane because it does help you last hit. That's the main thing that we're worried about as a hero in a lane, is having survivability with the regen. Also having the stats to last hit properly, because obviously last hitting is very important in the early game. If you have a slightly higher base damage than your enemy, Zeus here is hitting for 46 to 54. If I'm fighting against somebody who's hitting for 54 to 60 damage, they can hit that creep earlier than I can, and there's literally nothing I can do about it within reason to get that last hit. So having more base damage is a big plus. This still kind of depends on what kind of hero you are, and generally you should stick to main item builds, but that's one thing to keep in mind. So I've covered regen, I've covered last hitting power. Let's talk about the other things that aren't necessarily important for my hero. So if I'm playing Zeus here, do I really want this starting item build? The answer is probably not. In Dota, you're always looking to use items to fill your hero's weaknesses, and Zeus's, in this case, is not necessarily low HP. He does have a little bit of low HP, and that's what we're doing with our item build here. We're getting a very, very healthy HP pool. But let's say something a little bit more reasonable, since that was more for Invoker here. If I have a Salve and a Tango here, and then I pick up 3 Ironwood Branches and a Gauntlets of Strength, I get a little bit of last hitting power here. I also get a little bit of mana, because once again, intelligence increases my mana pool. And with mana, I can cast spells. That's a really good thing. And what is the Gauntlet doing for me? Just giving me HP. Now, if I'm not as concerned about that, I might be more willing to swap that out for something like a... maybe I want to make a Null Talisman or something. All of a sudden, I pick up a Mantle of Intelligence. I'm getting an extra 39 int, or mana pool out of this. And I get 3 bonus attack damage, which is going to help me last it a little bit better. And even still, if we look at all the items here, I can use all these in the future. I can make these 3 Ironwood Branches into a magic wand when I get the money. Watch. Bam, magic wand. All my Ironwood Branches are now inside this item. It's very, very good. And at some point I can say, oh, I have a Mantle of Intelligence. Well, I want to make this into a Null Talisman. And bam. So what you end up doing here, it's not that imperative, but at low levels, it's a nice thing to do, is turn your early game item slots into things that you plan to build into. That still give you that early game contribution. That's a very good thing. Now, you may be wondering, why did he fill his item slots with all of those Ironwood Branches? Like, yeah, sure, I made a wand, but let's say on a hero that doesn't need a wand. Let's say a hero like, a good example is Huskar. Huskar doesn't really need a mana boost. He does kind of like the HP boost. That's pretty cool on him. But generally, for hard carries that don't cast a lot of spells, a magic wand is generally not needed. So why am I buying these? The reason is that it's, hypothetically, if we could carry unlimited amounts of items, the Ironwood Branch is the best item in the game. What we have to look at is the payout per cost. So we're getting 1 to all attributes for 53 gold. So let's look at it this way. I'm getting 3 stats here. That's 1 to all attribute. That's 1 strength, 1 agility, and 1 strength. 6 to all attributes. If I fill my entire inventory with Ironwood Branches, which is just 6 slots, I'm getting plus 6 to all these things. How much did I spend here? 6 times 53 is just over 300. That is 318 gold. That's half of my starting gold. That's absolutely nothing. And look how much stats I have. Plus 6 to all stats. That's a big deal. So that's very cheap. So your cost is, you're spending 53 per 3 stats. I don't know what that math works out. It's not an easy number that I can do on the top of my head, so I'm just not going to mess around. I wish I had my calculator on my desk, but I do not have it. I still haven't found it. Actually, I think I'm missing batteries, but very, very cheap stats is an Ironwood Branch. That means in the early game, when your HP is low and your last hitting power is weak, you want to get as many Ironwood Branches as you can, at least when you have empty slots. It goes very, very far. I wouldn't want to get 6 Ironwood Branches, because now I have 300 gold and no regen, so maybe I would want to do something like 5 Ironwood Branches in a Tango, and then farm a fast bottle since I have leftover gold. Maybe I'd want to do something like this. 3 Ironwood Branches in a Tango. That's only 254 gold, I believe. About 250 gold. 150, 240 something. It costs about 240 gold. That means I'm going to get to my bottle really fast, but I still have the last hitting power a little bit. I still have a little bit of HP survivability, and I still have a little bit of extra armor as well being applied. And I have a Tango to get me to that bottle. Something like that is another choice I can make. So in case you guys didn't figure it out yet, another resource in the game is item slots. It's something that new players don't generally pay attention to, but when I mentioned the fact that Ironwood Branches, if I could have unlimited amounts, would by far be the best item in the game, everybody would stack Ironwood Branches up to a certain point, especially in the early game. They would stack virtually all Ironwood Branches, and maybe at some point pick up something like a mana regen item, something like a percentage regen item, something like that. You know, generally, if item slots were unlimited, you would see a crap load of Ironwood Branches. So this is another resource. We have gold, we have experience, and we have item slots, something that's generally not concerned with. Usually, item slots come down to a problem maybe in the very early mid-game before you start making items, as comp limits are very basic, but also in the mid-game, as you have to start making some choices. Do I really still need my Quelling Blade? Maybe I'll sell that and pick up a Bracer instead. Something like that. Is another choice you can make. Or in the late game, as a hard carry gets really, really farmed. You don't see this as much in pro games because the games end somewhere between 30 and 50 minutes on average, but let's say a late game scenario where an Anti-Mage has been farming like crazy and he's got Treads and he's got a Manta Style and he's got a Vanguard and he's got a Battle Fury and he's got a Butterfly and he's got a Basher, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do I sell next, you know? I need a TP scroll. That's going to take up one of my item slots. And that's where things get tricky. But that's just a basic demonstration of item slots are very important. So as a Zeus here, or as any player in the early game, you basically want to get the most benefit out of your starting gold and your starting item slots. So if I'm laning a Zeus, probably I would do something like this. So let's talk about the fact that you want to balance out your hero with your starting items. This is no different than the mid game or the late game. You can't just go, I'm going to get boots first on Zeus because I love boots first, because then I can run away from guys. Well, all of a sudden, what's going to happen? I have 260 mana here. I'm going to cast like 4 or 5 Chain Arc Lightnings, and then I'm completely out of mana. And this is a mistake that a lot of new players have, and especially League of Legends people, I feel like, generally complain about, oh my god, like, if you don't use your mana right, you're out of mana for 10 minutes. I literally saw somebody post this on an article, and I was like, oh my god, people don't understand the game. The problem is that, as a player, you need to fill in your hero's gaps. And this is the same thing for starting item builds. If I'm playing an Earthshaker, for example, Earthshaker is a strength hero who largely relies on his Fissure to do anything in the early game, and he's a strength hero, so his mana gain is pretty low. That's a generalization, but for Earthshaker, yes, his mana pool isn't that high. So what you have to buy Clarity Potions. You absolutely must buy Clarity Potions as an Earthshaker. It costs 50 gold, it gives you 100 mana. So when you cast a spell and you lose, 60% of your mana pool, you have a Clarity Potion that you can pop, and all of a sudden it's going to heal you up to enough mana. You have to get Clarity Potions on heroes like Earthshaker. If you do not, you're going to fall into that League of Legends player syndrome where they're like, oh, I'm out of mana, time to run back to base or something. I don't know. That's a generalization. I don't play League of Legends. But you need to fill in your item gaps with the items that you need. Your hero's gaps with items. You have to fill them. So as a Zeus, let's apply that to him. Zeus needs to cast his spells. He has a pretty low range, 350. His attack animation is horrible. One of the worst in the entire game, and his base damage really isn't that high. 41 to 49 is pretty low. He generally survives by last hitting with Arc Lightning, which means I'm going to have to cast this spell a lot. So as a Zeus, I'm going to say, I want lane control, I want to be able to cast spells, I want to make sure my mana is full, so I'm going to buy Clarity Potions. So if I'm playing a Zeus, I'm also going to buy some other items. I want regen, that's cool stuff. I might want to get to a semi-fast bottle, so I might not want to overspend on regen, but so far I've only spent 300 gold here. This is half of my total gold. This is regen. That's going to cover my mana and my HP. I'm not going to have to go back to base as a result. And let's fill this in. Once again, I have 300 gold. I could spend a circlet, and then I could get 2 Ironwood Branches. And all of a sudden I get plus 4 stats. If I wanted to, I could also not buy a circlet. It's pretty expensive, 185 for 2 to all stats, which is the equivalent to 2 Ironwood Branches. 2 Ironwood Branches cost how much? 106 gold. As you can see, once again, Ironwood Branches, very, very cost efficient. I didn't talk about that very well before when I mentioned it, but to quickly go over that, a circlet costs way higher ratio of stat to gold than an Ironwood Branch does, and let's apply that down as well. Ultimate Orb, 10 to all stats, 2100 gold. You're paying 210 gold per 1 attribute. That is way higher than an Ironwood Branch. That's 4 times greater than an Ironwood Branch, approximately. So that's very important to look at. So, but even still, I only had 1 item slot left, so I could have bought an Ironwood Branch here, which is cool and all, but I would still have 150 gold left over. I would have 1 less stat. It's just a choice that you have to make by going to the lane. Do you want to save the gold? Do you plan to make a bracer or something like that? And then at that point, sure, I can keep this circlet for a long time, eventually make a bracer. Things are great. And make a wand out of these, whatever. Wand bracer, that's what that would eventually turn into. And everything's beautiful, but in most situations, I would just do something like this. Bam. Or I would even be like, you know what? I'm just going to get 1 Ironwood Branch and I have 150 gold left over. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy 3 more freaking Clarity Potions and I'm going to spam spells like crazy. That's 500 mana. You start with 300, dude, and all of a sudden you get 500 more. That's a crap load of mana, if those don't get disabled at least. And that's a lot of last hits. That's a lot of harass on your enemy team. And look how strong this item build is compared to something like a Boots Tango. If I take a lot of damage, I can salve right up. If I take a little damage, I can tango up. If I want to spam my spells, dude, I've got 5 freaking Clarity Potions. I'm going to last hit like nobody's business, and I'm going to get to that bottle really quickly, and I'm going to dominate my lane. So this is just an item decision choice that I go for Zeus. You can do stuff like this, get some Clarity Potions, make sure you get the regen, get some stats, and once again, remember, sometimes you survive by 5 HP, sometimes you survive by less than 19 HP. Every 19 HP is 1 stat point. That Ironwood Branch occasionally will save your life, and that's what you have to remember. 3 Ironwood Branches, yeah, that could save my life. Sure, your boots might at some point save your life, but if we apply that to the general situation, if you go boots first, you're more likely than not just going to get harassed out of lane every single time by a good player. Guaranteed, every single time. So make sure you balance out regen, stats, and other things. Alright, a couple more starting item builds that are really important. Stat items are the most important things that people generally buy. Regen, stat, this first page is really important. If you're playing a support hero, please God buy an Animal Courier, Crystal Maiden, Vengeful Spirit. Somebody needs to buy an Animal Courier. Eventually get somebody to upgrade that. Once again, this is important because now, as a solo mid hero, I don't have to run back to base to buy my bottle. I can say, alright Courier, bring me my bottle. I just got 600 gold. I continue getting my EXP. I continue getting my farm. Make sure that you guys buy Courier. So Courier is purchased, no problem. Somebody else handled that. If you guys are really playing smart, you'll have 1 guy buy Courier, 1 guy buy wards. That first wards is going to spot runes, which means whoever's solo mid is going to have an advantage over the other guy if he doesn't have it, because you know immediately where the runes are spawned. If you have vision on the bot rune, and you look and it's like, oh, it's about to be 18 minutes. I'll look here right when it ticks 18. If I see no rune, I'll say, okay, rune's obviously top. There may be someone there watching it, but guaranteed the rune will be top. So you can run top and say, okay, yep, rune is there. You grab it, you bottle it up. Sometimes you'll have to be like, oh, I don't have any wards up. I'm going to run top and say, oh, is there a rune there? Oh, there's not. Okay, well, I guess I have to run bottom. And then you run all the way bottom. And then in the meantime, you come mid, and the enemy guy's like, oh, he just came from top and his bottle's empty. Time to go snag the rune. He runs bottom, he steals your rune, and all of a sudden it's like, well, crap. I just spent a lot of time running top. I spent some time running all the way bottom, and I didn't accomplish anything at all. So that's a big mistake to make. Try to get wards up. It does help your mid bottle. That's kind of a tangent, but even still. Observer Ward's very, very good at start. Animal Courier, somebody has to buy it. And the other starting items that people will purchase, not TP Scroll, occasional Smoke of Deceit, but that's more higher level stuff. But these starting base items, Gauntlets of Strength, Slipper of Agility, Mantle of Intelligence. These things are very, very nice. Slippers of Agility are very good on heroes that are hard carries and might want a last hit. Generally, I don't recommend it, though. Usually, a Quelling Blade is going to be better, unless you're a ranged agility hero, in which case the Slipper is going to increase your damage more. But make sure that you don't buy Slippers of Agility if you're playing a hero like Vengeful Spirit. This is a mistake that I see some Venges get. They're like, oh, I'm an agility hero. I need agility. So they're going to I'm pretend I'm a Vengeful Spirit for a second here. They're going to be like, oh, hell yeah, getting the regen, things are looking great, and 3 Ironwood Branches. Okay, cool. So they've got +6 agility, they've got 3 intelligence, they've got 3 strength. What is this accomplishing for a Vengeful Spirit? What does a Vengeful Spirit normally do? A Vengeful Spirit normally does not last hit. If she's playing correctly, she's going to let the Morphling last hit, or the Faceless Void last hit, or the Anti-Mage last hit. She's not going to be attempting any last hits. You could argue that, yeah, I'm going to be using this +6 agility to do damage to enemy heroes, but how often do you attack enemy heroes? It's really not that often, and even still, what am I missing right now? Vengeful Spirit needs mana to cast her spells. If she can't cast her stun, she's no better than any other low-ranged hero. I could be a ganking Zeus and be better with no mana. You know, that's pretty much equivalent to a Vengeful Spirit who's not casting spells. Spells are what make the difference, so if you run out of mana there, you know, things are not looking good. So don't spend your money on Slippers of Agility. They're very expensive for a support hero. You know, what else could a Venge could have bought? That could be a chicken right there. That could be a freaking courier, you know? Courier is way more important than something like a Slippers of Agility. So if you're playing a Vengeful Spirit, do not get that Slippers of Agility. You're not going to be last hitting creeps. You're not going to be hitting heroes that much more. You could buy 3 Clarity Potions with this. That's like 3 stuns. 3 stuns is way more than 3 damage. 3 damage, like 3/7 of an armor, who gives a crap, dude? 3 stuns is way more important. So make sure you buy Clarity Potions. Support heroes, do not buy Slippers of Agility. It's almost always a waste. You're almost always going to be better off with just Ironwood Branches. They're very cheap. You can buy Clarity Potions, you can buy wards, you can buy couriers, circlets as well. Too expensive for support heroes at the start of the game to afford. You can't afford it, literally. Fill up your item slots with Ironwood Branches and get those regen items. It's very, very important. So those are all the starting items. There's a couple more here. We have Rings of Protection, Quelling Blade, and Stout Shield, and I think that's about it. Yeah, I can cover some of these other things, but those are mostly do not buy things. Alright, so Ring of Protection. This builds into a Ring of Basilius. You cannot buy these from the side shop. It also builds into a Tranquil Boots, which is cool. I never really thought about that before, getting a fast Ring of Protection into Tranquil Boots, but it's definitely possible. But most importantly for the Basilius, you don't want more than 1 Basilius in each lane. The reason for this is the aura does not stack. It does give you some stats here. It gives you 6 damage and 1 armor. Not stats, of course, but it gives you things. It gives you 6 damage and 1 armor, which is good. So every person who holds that does get those. But the aura is the mana regen and the armor aura. Those are the main things that people buy the Ring of Basilius for, is for that mana regen aura and a little bit of armor. So having multiples of these in the same lane is a mistake. So make sure that you guys coordinate and don't get this. Another smart thing to do, don't purchase it straight off the bat. Do not buy an entire Ring of Basilius. It's not cost efficient usually. Almost always this is a mistake. This costs 500 gold. How much gold how much money do we have left over to spend on other stuff after this? We have 100 gold. That's like a salve. Or that is a tango. And what looks just as bad is this. Boots Tango. It's not as bad, for sure, but it's still bad. The best decision you can make if you want a fast Ring of Basilius, we see this all the time in high-level play, you get the Ring of Protection, because you can't buy that from the side shop. That's only 175 gold. And then you can do something like this. All of a sudden, we still have 200 HP worth of regen. We still have a bunch of stats, which is going to keep us alive, get us last hits, and add more mana. And you can still make the Ring of Basilius. If we check the side shop here, what's in the side shop? Oh, it's a Sage's Mask. What does that build into? It's a Ring of Basilius. So all of a sudden, if you go to a side lane, this is for side lane mainly. Mid lanes generally don't get Basiliuses as often because they get bottles instead. But if you're on a side lane, just buy the Ring of Protection, get a Salve and a Tango. I could even sell this and say, you know what, I just want to get a Clarity Potion here. And that's fine. You could do this if you want to. If you want to go to the lane like this, that's great. You're spending just as much money. You're just slightly altering your build if you want slightly more mana regen, and that's a good thing to do. And then once you get your first 325 gold, you can run into the side shop when it's safe and buy a Sage's Mask, and bam, all of a sudden, oops, I don't want to buy a Sage's Mask from there. I want to buy a Sage's Mask from here. And bam, look, 325 gold, and now look at my laning. 325 gold in, I don't even need to use a courier, and I've got a crap load of regen, I've got stats, I've got tons of mana regen from a Basilius and a Clarity Potion, and I'm going to be rocking my lane now. Only thing that's important, make sure you turn it off so that the Armor Aura does not apply to enemy creeps. If we look at the courier here, We'll see if it works. No, the courier does not work. Can't apply Basilius to him, but that's okay. It does give armor to your creeps, and if your creeps have more armor, that means they're more resilient, and the creep wave will push. So make sure you turn it off in the lanes. Important little tidbit. Alright, so that's important. That's a cool thing that you can do with Ring of Protection. A couple other items here. We have a Quelling Blade. We have a Stout Shield. Those things used together are generally frowned upon. The reason is they're both very expensive. Stout Shield is a good item to start off with, but the problem is it's quite expensive, so you generally have to fill in your inventory something like this. Once again, this is about 600 gold, I believe, 250, 350 with this, and then we go up to 440, and then it's about 150 here. So yeah, just about 600 gold here with these starting items. This is going to give you damage block. This can be good in a lane where you're trying to farm, and you're getting a lot of harass, so Stout Shields are very good for that. And sometimes the mid lanes will also pick this up. If you're a melee hero soloing against a range, it's very good. This doesn't leave you a lot of item slots. You'll generally have to burn through your regen or drop one of your Ironwood branches for you to transition this into another item. But generally, this is a good starting item build with a Stout Shield. Generally, what people do, and this is usually really, really dangerous, is they go, oh, I'm a farmer. I want to get a Quelling Blade because I can last it. I want to get a Stout Shield because I want to block damage, and then I'll get a Tango. But that's all the money they have. Usually what they do is bank on getting a Ring of Health, and the problem is that Ring of Healths are really expensive. They're 875 gold. If your laning experience goes bad, you won't be able to afford this by the time your Tango burns through. A Tango, once again, is not a lot of regen, so you're going to burn through that really, really quickly, and therefore, all of a sudden you won't be able to lane properly. So it's usually really dangerous to go for this item build, unless you know that your lane is going to be really safe, like you're doing a tri lane against a solo hero or something like that. So if you really want, you got to choose. You got to say, do I want a Stout Shield or do I want a Quelling Blade? So this is your option. Quelling Blade with stats and regen. Of course, you can get maybe a Clarity Potion or something like that. But Quelling Blade is here, selling that out, and there's the Stout Shield. Those are your options. Stout Shield, Quelling Blade. Pick one. Don't get both. Most likely don't get both. It's very dangerous. And once again, Quelling Blade is for melee heroes. Do not get it unranged. And of course, you cannot carry this with Kunkka, because there would be an exploit. Actually, I don't know if you can now. I'm assuming you still can't in Dota 2. There would have been an exploit otherwise, because you could have splashed the hit on enemy heroes using a Quelling Blade, which would have been an unfair bonus, because normally it's only supposed to let you do more damage to creeps. So feel free to use a Quelling Blade on melee heroes. Do not get it on range. It is not worth the gold. You can always get like 2 slippers or something, or like something like that.
The enemy's
much better.
middle tower has fallen.
Alright, a couple other nitpicks to point out. Sometimes people like buying a magic stick early. I really don't like this. It's very, very situational. It's really expensive. 200 gold is a lot of money. That's as much as a circlet. It doesn't give you last hitting power. It's good against heroes like Batrider or Zeus because they cast a ton of spells and that gives you HP and mana then. But generally, just don't bother getting a magic stick early. Unless you're against one of those heroes. Not a good thing usually. One final quick thing to point out here is the finished Wraith Band, etc. Bracer, Null Talisman. This isn't as easy as it used to be because Bracer is too expensive now. The cost did get shifted up. But if you look at the things that get built in them, sometimes players do stuff like, oh, I'm on a Wraith Band because I can afford that with 1 Tango. And once again, is this enough regen? The answer is no. And some high-level games will see allies trade items. So, for example, a Chen will buy me a salve, and he'll give me a salve. So, it's not cheating, but generally this is more regen than you expect. And a Wraith Band would give an agility hero a lot of last-hitting power. So, on an agility hero, it's cool, because it's like, okay, cool, I can last-hit really well, because Wraith Band gives 9 damage, and my item slots are empty. But generally, don't stick to this. At very high-level play, we see it sometimes, but don't do it unless you really, really know what you're doing. You want to stick to just make sure that you have the regen. Buy your salve and buy your Tango, and then buy what's ever left over. Then you can afford that stuff. If you random, you can do awesome stuff like on agility heroes. When I random, I usually do this, and I'm like, hell yeah, I'm a bastard, because you get 850 gold instead of 600, and all of a sudden you have plus 12 damage, and you have regen left over. That's frustrating to fight against personally when somebody randoms and they get really good items like that. That's like the only case where I would say finish a Wraith Band. Go for it. So I think that's about it. Make sure that you don't... Oh, I have one other point to make, but once again, make sure that you don't... Make sure you have enough regen. I've been saying this a bunch of times, but it's very important. Here's another item build that... Oh no, people can't actually afford, poor mans. I've seen people do this before. That's always really bad. How much regen do you have? 0. Who cares if you're blocking damage? Any damage you do to them is not going to get regen back very quickly. The final item build, please God guys, do not do this. Even if you random, this is generally very, very dangerous. But what they do is they run up to the high ground, or they go to a side shop, or they run to the secret shop and they say, oh, I'm just going to wait. I start with 850 gold. I'm going to wait 25 seconds, and then I'm going to pick up a Ring of Health start. So I'm going to have so much regen, it's not even going to matter. But the problem is, look at Zeus right now, 511 HP. It's not just about the regen. Yeah, Ring of Health is a ton of regen, but it doesn't fill all your gaps. What if somebody level 1 ganks you, you know? What if they come gank you at level 1 and you die just barely one hit, you know? That could have been Ironwood Branches saving your life. Ring of Health can't stop against burst damage. It stops harassment over time is what that covers. So make sure you do not buy a fast Ring of Health. You got to have stats. You got to have HP regen. You probably want some kind of mana regen if you're a caster of some sort. That is always important to have. The final bad item build to get. Do not get this. Bottle start, man. We see this all the time, and I'm going to briefly talk about why it sucks. If you see a bottle start, laugh. Don't maybe yell at them, but tell them it's maybe not very good. But look at it. How much regen does this give you? 135 health, 3, and that's 3 uses until it goes empty. So 135 times 2 is 270, and then another charge is 405. What heals for 400 HP, but doesn't cost 600 gold? It is a salve, so a healing salve heals just as much as a bottle does for charges. But you might say, oh, but then I just have to bottle up a rune. No problem at all. My bottle's going to be filled again, and then I can heal another 400 HP. That's great if you get a rune. Did your allies get wards up? Probably not. And if they don't get wards up, have fun guessing. What if your enemy also gets a bottle, and then all of a sudden he beats you to a rune? And you're like, oh god, I need regen really bad, and now I have no regen, and I have to go back to base. That's what happens. You go back to base, and you have to pop your or refill your bottle, and then heal up, and then run back. Do not bottle start, guys. It's really bad. And once again, it's the same case with getting a fast Ring of Health. It still leaves your HP low. Still leaves your HP low. Very important. So, bottle start, not good. It doesn't give you that much regen. And what happens, for example, if you run out of HP and you're full mana, and all of a sudden you pop your 3 bottle charges? The mana goes to complete waste because your mana was full. Or what if you need to pop it to get mana regen, and then all of a sudden you take some damage, you're like, oh god, I'm out of bottle charges now I can't heal. It's like, it's a very good item, but it's not a good first item, because it's going to leave you very vulnerable. At least get the stats. If you want a fast bottle, make sure one of your allies gets a courier, and the best thing you can do is this build. 3 Ironwood Branches, 1 Tango, you're spending 240 gold, you're already at 360, that means you literally have to get 5 last hits and you have a bottle. I could spend my Arc Lightning, could cast that 4 or 5 times and get enough last hits for a bottle. If I'm the worst last hitter in the world and only can use Arc Lightning to get last hits, I get a bottle, I bring it to me, and this is what my item build looks like. Isn't this much better? I have stats, I have a Tango, assuming I haven't used it yet, and I have a bottle. So I have a lot of HP regen, I have the stats, and I can keep going from there. So that's very important. So I think I covered pretty much all of the basics for items, guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'm always happy to answer questions that I didn't cover appropriately in the video. But that's pretty much everything for starting an item build. Make sure you fill your inventory, make sure you cover all of your heroes' holes, make sure you have some stats, and make sure that you have ample regen to stay in your lane so you do not get underleveled and you can perform well in the mid game. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this starting item overview. I've covered these topics in my guide and stuff, but I thought it was about time I made a video, so I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. Bye.